much needed, long overdue piece. To Ian's point, we still have to wait to see exactly how Victor Gyokeres settles into the Premier League. Everything we've seen, certainly at Sporting, suggests, as Ian says, suggests that he should provide goals. The one thing, and to your question about the final piece, that I feel Arsenal have been missing for the last few years is that out-and-out goal scorer, that target man up front. If Gyokeres can do that, it certainly makes Arsenal a whole lot better. Making Arsenal better, while that's good in a vacuum, so has so many other clubs in the Premier League.
A lot of draws last season, Ale. That's what we're looking at here on this graphic. Had they had that striker, that target man up front, could that have changed for them and given them 3 points in some of these games?
Well, yes. Now, we're assuming that in these games they didn't come from behind or they didn't score a late goal in order to tie it up. But I get your point. I understand where you're coming from with this. And what I would say is, if Arsenal's expectations are, and as it should be, to win the Premier League, then what's it going to take for Victor Gyokeres? What sort of productivity do we need to have from this player in order for Arsenal to be indeed in this title race? Well, you look at Liverpool, and you look at Manchester City, and you look at Mohamed Salah, and you go to Erling Haaland, and you're looking at somewhere around 40 goals a season in all competitions. Now, he's coming from scoring 54 in Sporting. I'm not going to devalue the importance of scoring 54 goals because that's a lot of goals. That is a bunch of goals. Having said that, we need to assume that it's going to be more difficult for him in the Premier League and that his level of productivity and consistency needs to be at the level of Salah and Erling Haaland. Now, that's historic levels, but that's what it's going to take for Arsenal to turn those games that you mentioned, those draws, into wins and to turn those single points into 3 points and to actually be there in the end where they think they should be. That's a big question. It's also a little bit concerning for me. All we know from Victor Gyokeres, if we're really honest with ourselves, because none of us are sitting back watching the Portuguese league every weekend. We're not doing it, okay? And that's the truth, right? And anybody that tells you, no, I'm all about it. Oh, I know what's happening between Sporting and Gil Vicente. Yeah, no, you don't. So what we know is what we have seen in Champions League from Victor Gyokeres. And we have the lasting image of how silly he made Manchester City look. And that was impressive. But then you ask yourself the question, well, who didn't make Manchester City look silly last season defensively? And so if that's the standard, then we have to be careful that that's the expectation we have for this player, because it is also true that in the defining moments of Champions League competition for Sporting, he was not first choice. Konrad Harder was. Again, since I'm not watching the Portuguese league every weekend, I cannot tell you how good Konrad Harder is or isn't. But I can tell you that if my guy, Victor Gyokeres, is the difference maker, then how come he's not starting that first game against Borussia Dortmund in the defining stages of this competition? And it was like that for the last few matches in the group phase as well. Or not group phase, league phase. Maybe some injury concerns, maybe some issues here and there. I'm not going to speculate. But it would be nice to have the conversation. I don't have access to Rui Borges, the manager of Sporting, and ask him the question, how come he wasn't playing in these games? Because that is something that would tell us a lot about Victor Gyokeres and what his potential actually is with Arsenal.
What do you think, Ian, on him being that missing piece for Arsenal?
Well, I think he's got to have a better goal-scoring return, hasn't he? I think you put up some figures there with Havertz as the leading goal scorer, but I think he was only single figures in the Premier League. So Arsenal had the best defence in the Premier League last season, and yet they finished 10 points behind Liverpool, who won the championship. So it's easy to see where the problems were. I mean, we just don't know. It is a question mark, as Xhaka and Ali are saying. It's a question mark about whether he's going to be able to do it in the Premier League. Not everybody can, as we've seen from Darwin Núñez, who's recently come from Portugal. But my guess is, having seen a bit of Gyokeres, he's had a long apprenticeship, as a player. He's not an overnight sensation. He's learned his trade at a lot of smaller clubs. He knows about the physicality in English football because he played in the Championship for Coventry. I think he's going to come off, and I think Arsenal have done their homework, and they think he's going to come off. And you look at the kind of team they're going to have out there. They're going to have Madueke, who could be dangerous from either wing, although a little inconsistent. Saka, Gyokeres, Zubimendi, Odegaard and Rice in midfield. it looks a pretty tasty outfit, doesn't it, if the Gyokeres signing works?
Yeah, obviously, Ian, you've just touched there on those transfers. Let's talk about Arsenal's transfer business so far. It sounds as though you think that they could be the extra missing pieces as well as Gyokeres for this season.
Well, they've got a big gap to bridge, I think, to Liverpool, who, as you all know, have spent very big themselves. So, they're not complacent. They've restocked pretty spectacularly, as have Manchester City and Chelsea. So it's been a mad, crazy summer in the transfer market with over £1 billion being spent. I think we're going to have a heck of a title race this season. But, Arsenal have been runners-up 3 times running. They're going to be in that title race. Whether they can win it, well, we're going to have to wait and see for that.
Yeah, you wonder how confident Mikel Arteta himself is about whether Arsenal